Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Goin Digital Show, the podcast for K-12 school leaders. I'm your host, Greg Goins, a K-12 school superintendent in the state of Illinois, and we're so glad to have you with us tonight, right here live on the TeachCal Network. If you're with us for the very first time tonight, welcome, and I'll let you know that the Goin Digital Show is a live one-hour program that promotes the principles of digital leadership in K-12 schools and features many of the nation's top school superintendents, principals, and innovators in public education. If you'd like to connect with us tonight, we certainly encourage you to do so. Just tweet out with the EduLive hashtag if you have a question or comment for myself or our guest tonight. We would be glad to connect with you. This is episode number 10, and tonight we're talking all about the highly acclaimed educational documentary, Most Likely to Succeed. It's an honor and a privilege to have Ted Dintersmith, the executive producer of the film, join us tonight. Also excited to have two very special guests, Ben Daley, the chief academic officer at High Tech High, and Ben is also featured in the movie. And I also have my friend David Britten, a superintendent from the state of Michigan, and David and I will try to give a perspective from the superintendent's chair about the film and the direction we think we need to go after seeing this wonderful, wonderful film. So welcome to you all tonight.
Hey, glad to be here.
Glad to be here.
Well, we're going to have a good time tonight. I'm so excited about this film, and it's really forced a lot of people to think differently about public education, and most importantly, it's inspired a lot of us, myself included, to kind of rethink public education and the path we need to take moving forward to create 21st century schools. So just to give you a little information about the film examines the history of education, revealing the growing shortcomings of our school model in today's innovative world. It's simply, in my opinion, the best educational documentary that you will see. And on behalf of school leaders around the country, to you, Ted, I want to give you a big thank you for putting together such a wonderful, wonderful product. And we'll start tonight with you, Ted. If you can just give us a little bit of background about yourself and a little backstory about the film.
Sure. You know, I spent my career in innovation, so I was in venture capital for most of it. And in the course of that time, I realized a couple things. You know, the first is that automation is going to eliminate every structured job in the economy. And then the second thing is that at first I observed, gee, it's almost as though the school was designed to crush the creativity out of kids. And then when I started digging into the history of school, I said, wait a minute, there's no almost to that. The model that we have, designed 125 years ago, did have as an explicit goal to crush creativity out of kids. And so seeing that collision, I felt I needed to do something about it. And I love the power of film, so I did a search. I did a 6-month search to find the right director because I really wanted something that was uplifting. I mean, it's really easy to do negative films about school, and it's really easy to do boring films about school. And so I found this guy, Greg Whiteley. You know, we struck a sort of a deal where, you know, I stayed out of his way, let him create a great film, and just sort of cheered him on and helped him. And he delivered, you know, so we premiered in January at Sundance. It's been at over 20 major film festivals. We were opening night a couple weeks ago for a summit at the White House. And, you know, we're just sort of going everywhere. I'm taking it to all 50 states this year.
And just tell us, I know you've been on the road a lot, and I know you're a strong advocate not only for the film but for public education in general. What kind of response are you getting? What's the general feedback? And I would sense there's a great deal of momentum moving forward and a lot of excitement.
Well, I think that one misconception a lot of us have is that there's not a lot of pent-up innovation on the part of teachers, principals, district superintendents, state school officers. I'm finding quite the opposite. I think they're really excited to do new things, and they're just generally constrained by a whole bunch of different, you know, obstacles. I mean, generally referring to them as the system. And you know, what the film does is that they show it to their community, it gets everybody of the mindset to be far more supportive of the innovations they want to do. And so, you know, I've been really heartened. Nobody, you know, I sort of joke back and forth with Greg Whiteley because we call into question every assumption you have about education. And I tell him, like, people ought to be throwing rotten tomatoes at us at the end of the film. And, you know, people are uniformly so positive. I mean, people are just inspired by thinking of schools as places where dreams come to flourish instead of die. And so, you know, I think that's given us a lot of encouragement to take this to the next level in terms of exposure.
Now, in terms of your background, you have been a venture capitalist. I believe you retired from that line of work now, but you gave an amazing TED Talk that is available on YouTube. I believe was it TED Talk, was it Fargo?
Fargo, yeah.
Fargo, yeah. I mean, it was a really wonderful piece, and I actually watched it this morning. But one of the things you said that really kind of I found very interesting is you said at some point you stopped being a person and you started to become a cause. You
Yeah.
still feel that way?
Well, my wife and two kids are downstairs for Thanksgiving week, and I'm here. So, yeah, I think they at least feel that way. But, I want to give a shout out. I mean, because I'm like a minor actor in this, but if you look at the work that Ben's doing, that Dave's doing, that you're doing, I mean, these are the people I think that are doing the really amazing things in our country. And so to be a part of kind of showing the country broadly the amazing things our teachers and educators are doing, and what they're capable of doing if we just support them and kind of trust them, that to me is what's exciting about this.
And Ben, as the Chief Academic Officer at High Tech High, I guess for our listeners out there, can you explain what your main responsibilities are and tell us a little bit about your role in the film?
Well, my main responsibilities, that's a hard ball coming out early. That's good. I'm still trying to figure that out myself, actually. So, I was a founding teacher at High Tech High back in 2000 when we had 12 teachers and 200 students. And now we have 13 schools and about 5,300 students and over 600 employees. So a lot's changed in the last 15 years. And so partly I'm kind of along for the ride trying to keep my head above water and figure out what I should be doing. But I started as a teacher. I was the head of the first High Tech High for some years, and I think the way I think about my role is that our schools are definitely not as good as some people think they are, and we have a lot of work to do, sort of on an ongoing basis, to make them better. So I think of myself a lot in terms of what can I do to what's sort of the agitation role I can play in helping us. Let's look at how we're doing. Let's take a kind of good hard look at our data. Where is it not where we would like it to be, and then what might we do about it? So that's kind of, I guess, broadly how I think about what I'm trying to do at High Tech High.
And for those of you that have yet to see the film, High Tech High is located in San Diego, California. Very innovative school. It was one of the big stars of the film. And Ted, why did you choose High Tech High, and what is it about it that you found most appealing?
Well, we actually started with a dozen places, and so Greg went and filmed kind of all over the country. And one of the points that we differed on, and I lost, and I'm glad I lost, is I felt it was important to show lots of things are happening at different schools, that it wasn't just a one-school thing. And I think Greg, he clearly prevailed, but his point was, unless you really got to know the characters in the film, it wouldn't have the emotional impact. And we tried an early cut where we showed multiple schools, and by the end there was just a laundry list of figures. And so it was partly High Tech High, but a lot of it was the teachers and those two students. And they just, we love the school. The school's great, but we're quite clear, and I think we don't even say it. High Tech High says it, is that they say this is how they do it. It's not how other schools should do it. We're not saying that this is the answer, but Samantha and Brian, their story, it had suspense and drama. Somebody today said to me that what was really appealing to them about the film was you actually see an evolution. You don't just get a snapshot, but you watch these kids and their teachers change right in front of you over the course of the film. And I think that's what's really powerful, because you not only see the kids evolving and developing, but you see the teachers. One unanticipated consequence of this is when we screen this film to high school kids, so many of them come up to me afterwards and say, this makes me want to be a teacher. I think that's really, we never thought that, that wasn't even in a million years something we anticipated. But when you watch the role caring adults have in kids as they develop, it's quite powerful. And so I think it really just a bunch of things converged, and we ended up, that was the story that ended up telling the tale, and it helped. I mean, High Tech High does, it's famous. They do lots of great things. It's beautiful. The space was really visually appealing. And, as I said, if we didn't know, we started filming probably 100 students in 12 schools, you never know at the beginning which one's going to turn out to be the really great ending. I mean, a lot of people who watch the film, they sort of, because you see so many scripted Hollywood films, you sort of think, oh, of course, they must have just started with these two students and filmed it from beginning to end. But, you know, it was a lot of work to sort of dig out a compelling story here.
And one of the things I found fascinating about the film was, you know, High Tech High has very similar demographics to other public schools throughout the state of California, and that's by design. And Ben, just speak a little bit about the reaction that the student body has had about the film, the faculty and staff. You know, we look at the film from the outside and we think, wow, what a wonderful place, what great innovations taking place there. But for you, I guess it's just business as usual, correct?
Well, I mean, it's not every day that we have a film that is, you know, premieres at Sundance that has us in it at all. So it's not quite. I wouldn't quite go to business as usual. But yeah, of course, you're right in a sense. Like, you know, we got new students. You know, every day we have students that we're working with all the time. So we are, in that sense, just kind of keeping our heads down and doing the work that we're trying to do. I mean, there's been a kind of range of reactions. I think that, you know, what you probably wouldn't guess about High Tech High from the outside is how much it's not like 100% of people all have the exact same vision and everyone's exactly clear on what we're trying to do. And in fact, that's something that I've been, in my role, I've been thinking about a lot is as we've gone, as I said, from 12 employees to 680, like, have we done a good job of explaining to everyone, here's what we're about, here's what we're trying to do. And so I think a number of us felt like the film, what I think we really liked about the film was that it was sort of capturing what we're trying to, it definitely got at what we're trying to do. And so we thought from an internal perspective, we will definitely show it every year to our new teachers, which we did this fall, as a way to say, yeah, this is kind of what we're after. So I think that's one reaction. But of course, you also have other people who feel like I'm also feeling a way, like, hey, come on, let's not, you know, believe our own, you know, BS, whatever. Like, hey, we're not as good as the film. Like, so there's sort of like a consternation, like, oh, holding up High Tech High to the world is so great when we all know we've got plenty of problems. So I think there's sort of a mix of reactions. I think there's kids who feel very proud about the film, and I think there's a lot of kids who probably don't even know about it, and then probably some people who feel kind of salty about it too. So it's probably a mix of reactions, I would say.
Dave Britten, I want to bring you in as a school superintendent in the state of Michigan. I know you've had a lot of opportunity to see the film. Can you tell us just a little bit about your school district, and then tell us what your experience has been like, you know, through the lens of watching the film?
Sure. Well, I grew up in the school district that I'm in. It's a small district. It's an urban, suburban area just adjacent to the city of Grand Rapids. And I was asked to come back about 13 years ago and take on a middle school principal challenge. When I was growing up in the district, it was surrounded by a lot of manufacturing firms, a lot of factories, a lot of good paying jobs for a lot of the folks that lived in the community. And now, ever since I've come back, I've spent a lot of time walking around the community, and the one thing that's obvious is those factories are not there anymore. At the same time, the community has changed substantially over the course of the last 20, 30 years. It's now largely a Hispanic community, very diverse Hispanic culture, and it's also a very low-income area. A lot of our kids come to us lacking a lot of academic skills and content knowledge, obviously, coming from either different states or different countries. We've been struggling now for the last 10 years or so, trying to figure out the solution to help these kids be successful as some of our more affluent neighboring school districts. And we work pretty hard, but we haven't really achieved the level of success that we want to. And so for the last couple of years, I've been scratching my head as superintendent, saying there's got to be something different. We're missing the boat here or something. And I was introduced to the film just briefly through some clips when I was out in Virginia last spring. Pam Moran hosted us along with a few others, and kind of a light came on, and I came back to Michigan and worked to try to get a hold of the film. It was just starting to, I think we were just starting to put it out in production, so I patiently waited, and we were able to show that film here earlier this summer to a small group of folks at the time, and the film is kind of the well, it's the type of film that just says that points you in the right direction, for lack of a better way of saying it. It's like you knew something was wrong, you knew something had to change, and it turned the lights on for us. Yes, I've seen the film now 8 times, and about to see it 2 more times next week. And we'll be showing it to our senior class as well as our entire district staff next week. Just got the email today from my secretary that just did arrive today, so that's exciting. But we also, at the same time, we're working with Steelcase Foundation. They came to our district and said, we'd like to work with you on something, anything. What keeps you up at night? And I explained to them my concern that no matter how hard we work, we don't think our kids are going to get to the level they got to get at if you're going to measure it by tests and specific content area. We need something different. We need these kids to be successful. We need them to walk out of here and be able to pursue whatever dream they have. And they bought into the idea of, and even suggested it to us, and we looked into it, of getting involved with a human-centered design system and completely redesigning our school district. So we have embarked on that process this year as well. We're 10 weeks into that process. We have some excellent facilitators, and they, in fact, are going to be here with us next week when we do show the film, and they're going to help facilitate the discussion with it. So we're doing some pretty exciting things here, but we've got a long way to go, and I think this film is helping to ignite a fire under a lot of folks.
And Ted, I know that you did a ton of research and probably watched every documentary that's available out there. And you know, one of the things that I really liked about the film is so many documentaries of the past really focused on the negative, and this was more of an uplifting look at thinking about the future. And you actually used the term, I believe, again in your TED Talk. You were talking about isolated pockets of great innovation and best practice. And there are great things happening all throughout the country, but too many times those stories aren't told. So can you speak to that just a little bit?
Sure. You know, I was in Salt Lake City. We had a screening there. We had 500 in the audience, and one of the audience members said, you know, there are sparks and embers of great learning going on in schools all across our state. And I think it's someone I was encouraged by it. He said, but I think your film may help us turn that into a bonfire. And now that I travel, I actually did a screening in Grand Rapids where Dave is. So I've been going kind of everywhere, and it's been so interesting because places you're just blown away by some of the amazing things going on. And you know, but oftentimes it's viewed as the alternative school, or the unusual teacher, or the outlier, or the progressive, or the alternative. Those tend to be the adjectives that I think we need to replace those with, these are the places where real learning is going on. And I think what happens is when people see it and they realize, whoa, and I love the way Dave put it. I mean, it's sort of like this, it resets your whole thinking about school, because there are all these things that you just have baked in as assumptions that we're learning, important, that, you know, that we're really learning, which is often not the case, and that what we're really learning is really important, which is also often not the case. And so, you know, I feel like that the tide is sort of turning. I'm actually way more, you know, at the start of this I was pretty pessimistic, actually, and now I'm a lot more optimistic, which I would have predicted it would go the other direction. But when you travel and you see, you know, and as I said, one thing I'm doing here this year, I've just made it my personal policy that I won't take any money from anybody, and so I do it all on my own nickel. I often, you know, support things like the location for the screening, but I'm doing that on purpose because I think way too often the people that offer opinions about education are doing it based on the rich areas of the country, And I can guarantee you, I am not going, like I'm going everywhere. And you just see this hunger for something. I'll give you an anecdote that really gave me enormous encouragement on this. But we screened it in Newark, Eastside High School. And a kid comes up to me afterwards and he said, we read in history how our country came together to put a man on the moon a long time ago. Do you think our country could come together again and make our schools great? It's like, I sure as heck hope so. But, like that's what people want. People are really ready to hear something aspirational. As you said, most everything that's been done. I mean, I had a visceral negative reaction to Waiting for Superman. And, it was a nice story and it was artistically well done. But it was, I think, inexcusable. And I think it vilified teachers. And I think it gave this false illusion that if you could just win a lottery, all was good. And, it had nothing to do with the core issues, and it gave you no hope for what could be done. And so, what I feel this film has done is it really shows people and immerses them in something where, the teachers and the students are engaged and inspired. And, some of the scenes that didn't get into the film, Ben may not even know this, but Greg has this pair of scenes where he interviews the students during the day, and he says, what do you like about your school? This school is great. We love the school. One of the best things is we have no homework. And then he follows them home at night, and it's like 10:30, and they're working on stuff. He says, I'm just curious. Like 9 hours ago, you told me you have no homework at this school, and here you are working at 10:30 at night. And the kids look at him and say, well, this isn't homework. We want to do it. And that, to me, is the key point. Why are we having our kids work on things they want to work on instead of grinding through worksheets, particularly when we can't give them an answer for why it's ever going to be useful?
Yeah, and that's a great point. And Ben, to jump to you, I think, again, one of my favorite parts of the film, without giving too much away to those that haven't seen it yet, but there's this conflicting argument that, what is the purpose of the school experience? Is it to prepare kids for college admissions, or do we want to prepare kids for life and what's going to happen in their future? And how do you address that on a day-to-day basis at High Tech High?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Unfortunately, there's no real simple answer to that because, there is the reality that, and Ted and I might disagree on this a little bit, actually, but I mean, I think the data that I see is that for most kids, getting a college degree is still a hedge on unemployment, and it's still it still helps you in terms of salaries. And granted, cost of college, et cetera, we have all these debates around that, loans, et cetera. So we feel like, particularly for low-income students, but really for all students, we still feel like it would be irresponsible for us to not have kids ready to make that transition to college, at least to have the opportunity to do so. I don't think Ted disagrees with that part. And so there's sort of this tension, this is very real tension of you're preparing students for college on the one hand, and you're also trying to prepare them for career and successful, engagement in civic life, etc. And then, I mean, just to give an example, I took a group of students to a large college for College Day. We have an advisory group system where we have kids 9th through 12th grade, and so we all visited this college. And a High Tech High alum came out. He was a college junior, and he was a computer science major, and he came out to talk to us about his experience at High Tech High. And so, of course, we asked him questions like, what was hard about transitioning from High Tech High to this college? And he said, well, of course, math. And we all kind of groaned, the adults kind of groaned inside when he said that. And so afterwards, I said to him, well, can you tell me more about what we could have done better to prepare you for college? And he said, oh, nothing. I said, oh, don't tell me nothing. I mean, come on, you said the thing about math. Like, come on, it's okay. You're not going to hurt my feelings. Like, what is it that we could have done better? And he said, well, no. You see, what happened was it was fall quarter, and I was in calculus, and I didn't understand why I had to learn these things. And I would turn to my friends and I'd say, why? But I mean, why are we learning this? And my friends were like, what do you mean, why are you learning it? Just memorize the formula and write it down. And I was so confused the whole first quarter. So I got a B in calculus. But then second quarter, I realized, okay, just memorize the formula and then write it down. And so then I got an A, and now I'm a computer science major. And I said, oh, so I mean, But in thinking of that transition, I mean, do you wish that we had, I mean, should we have not made you ask why quite so much, or should we have better prepared you? So you say, no, whatever you do, don't change that part. And so I'd love that there's like this real tension of, and I'm not trying to like bash all college professors or something, but like preparing students for the college experience they're about to have is like this double-edged sword, because if they're going to be sitting in large lectures and just kind of getting a bunch of information thrown at them, they have to regurgitate for a test at the end, like that's real. And it's like we have to think about that and help them across this transition. And at the same time, I think I try to chide our folks. We had this internal debate about this. Are we college prep or aren't we? Well, yes, we are college prep, but like it doesn't mean we're going to have all our kindergartners sitting in like a lecture hall with 500 students, you know, listening to a lecture and then taking a test at the end, because that's not a really good idea. So there's kind of this, I think there's a balance that we're trying to strike with that.
And Dave, I want to bring you in. You know, as a school district superintendent myself, you and I probably have a lot of the same views on these type of things. But I mean, it's really a shift in thinking when you talk about you know, building future-ready schools, which I'm sure you know, we've both attended the future-ready summits. But it drives me crazy when, you know, you still have elementary school teachers that spend 3 weeks memorizing states and capitals when, you know, they can Google it and find it. They can find it quicker than the teacher can actually tell them which page in the book to turn to. So, I mean, we have to rethink the way we're doing things in the classroom. I mean, how are you trying to do those things in your school district?
What we're trying to do is trying to change the mindset. I think this goes along with a little bit what Ben was saying too. We're trying to change the mindset of school to be a strengths-based educational experience. Schools have been, for the last 100 years, a deficit-based system. We start kids out. I mean, now we even test them coming into kindergarten because we want to know what are their learning deficits before they walk in the door. None of those tests measure what are their strengths when they walk in the door, so that we can build on those strengths. And particularly in a district that I serve, a lot of our kids have some tremendous strengths that just are hidden because every day we're trying to get them to conform to a content-based system that wants to fill in the gaps, fill in those learning gaps based on what those deficits are. So a lot of those teachers, those elementary teachers that hesitate to try innovative processes, are caught in that deficit trap, afraid that they're going to be evaluated, afraid that they're going to be ostracized if they are not bringing and filling in those gaps for those kids. I see you smiling there, Ted.
Yeah, well, I am. I mean, you picked two of my favorite examples, which are state capitals and calculus, and you know, and some I think are easy to change. You know, for instance, state capitals. I think we'd all agree. We all had to memorize the state capitals. I'm now going to be pretty good at it because I'm going to them all, but nobody remembers them. And you think about just ever so slightly shifting that from memorizing the state capitals to picking a state and saying, okay, why do you think they picked Springfield as the capital of Illinois, and what would you have picked? Why do you think they picked Lansing, and what would you have picked? Why do you think they picked Sacramento? What would you have picked? Or, you know, go back in time. You know, in 1849, the capital of California was Monterey. Show the kids some original journal articles about the selection process. Did they make a good choice or a bad choice? And so I think that there's on some things, it's really within our power to shift the lessons ever so slightly and actually get students and teachers reimagining what they're covering and why it's important. Because I guarantee you, once you start thinking the logic behind why a location's a state capital, you start to remember state capitals, right? You remember, okay, so it's in the center of the state. Oh, well, that's probably why Bismarck's the capital of North Dakota. Calculus is a totally different thing. And it's funny you mentioned it because I'm in the middle of writing an article on that, because I think people are just plain clueless when it comes to math and how it's used. And it goes from college admissions officers to high school guidance counselors to colleges to, they're just a bunch of people that just don't understand anything about math than make the policy decisions. So I was at the White House summit 2 weeks ago. There's the silliest stuff going on. I mean, they put up a map of the United States with all the calculus-deprived hotspots. And it's like the civil rights issue of the 21st century is that 50% of kids in our country aren't in schools, high schools, where they can take calculus. And I raise my hand and say, does it even make any difference to you that no adult uses it? You know, that it's all done computationally. You know, I mean, I have a PhD in math modeling from Stanford. I back the top scientists or engineers. I actually know what's going on. It's all done computationally. You could spend 15 minutes on Wolfram Alpha, and you will replace 9 months of high school calculus. And they never get to how it's applied, and they never get to how it's used. And so, but they have to grind through it in high school to get into colleges, because admissions officers say, oh my gosh, you actually chose to take statistics, which, by the way, every career needs and everybody needs for citizenship. You made that foolish choice instead of taking calculus, which nobody needs and never will ever use. Then you get into, you know, college, and they will say, oh, prerequisite for a business major, calculus. Well, I did pretty darn well in business, and I can tell you no one ever uses calculus in business. And it's like, it's really profound, right? And one of the things I say is, every adult, the adults making decisions about what kids need to be good at, owe it to the kids to be able to explain why it's useful. And so when people mindlessly blabber on about the need for calculus, I have no patience for it, because they are uninformed, they are just passing on what we've done for year after year, and they are giving kids terrible advice.
And you know, what I find fascinating is everyone's an expert on public education for the simple fact that everyone had that experience. And we have to kind of shift the thinking to, you know, we're planning schools for our kids' futures, not our past. You know, schools cannot be, they're not there for adults, they're there for kids. And, you know, one of the things we also, I think we all agree on, and I think, Ted, you actually said this in one of the interviews you gave, or maybe in the TED Talk again, but talking about the traditional model and how it really eliminates innovation and creativity. But I also think we're seeing a huge shift. I see it on Twitter and throughout social media. You're seeing more and more maker spaces that are created in schools. You're seeing Genius Hour pop up. You're seeing more innovative types of curriculum that's incorporated. So I'll just pose this question to all three of you. Are you seeing that shift, and what do we need to be thinking about in terms of bringing that creativity back to the classroom?
I'm seeing a shift. You're seeing a lot more talk about maker spaces and making and project-based learning, but my fear right now is that these are programs, and if you really want to scare teachers away, show them another new program you're about ready to bring into the school or into the district. I think what we have to do is we have to focus on changing the culture that supports those kinds of programs, and you can't just do it in the school itself. You got to bring the whole community along, and you don't want to wait to spring it on the community at the last minute. You need to be bringing them along right from the get-go. You need to be transparent about where you see the problem and what you see as the solution, and have them help in devising what works for your district and your schools.
Ben, what's your take?
Yeah, you know, I was just thinking about, so Kim Smith, who was the founder of New Schools Venture Fund and is running this leadership program now, she shared with me I believe it's her idea about the 3 waves of school reform from the last, sort of since like 1983. And wave 1 was Ted Sizer, Coalition of Essential Schools, kind of all that kind of work, and a lot of kind of ground up, community-based. We can't just, you know, impose from without. We need to kind of include the community in the thinking about this work, and exhibitions and a lot of the work that a lot of us are trying to do in schools. And then wave 2 she describes as kind of the quote ed reform era, which was obviously very focused on sort of top-down policies, accountability, test scores, and of course there's some good aspects of it, even though it's kind of getting a bad name in terms of, you know, shining a spotlight on inequities in our system, and et cetera, et cetera. And so Kim's point is that we kind of had wave 1 and wave 2 and sort of thesis, antithesis, and what we need now is wave 3, which is synthesis. And so I feel very kind of intrigued and hopeful by this idea of taking the best aspects of wave 1 and wave 2 and kind of working together around that in this new way of kind of in sort of what's next. Because I do think there were aspects that were very quite clever and smart from all the different reforms that have come along. There was a piece of it that was good, even if there were parts that could be refined. So I guess I do totally agree that there is. I feel that the pendulum's shifting. I think 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it felt like if you weren't talking about raising test scores, no one even wanted to hear what your idea was. And that has shifted, obviously, for sure. There's, I think, a fatigue around basing everything on bubble tests. And so I guess my question then is, like, what's next? And I agree that, a concern I have about makerspace is that Randy Shearer, one of our teachers, just wrote a piece for Ed Week describing how a potential problem with makerspaces is, like, that's the one place in school where we make. And, in fact, we want to have, like, making happen all over the place. And so I think that's an interesting that's sort of a pushback. On the one hand, I think it's great to have maker spaces where kids can make stuff, and then also let's make sure it's not, like Dave said, kind of siloed off into a little program over here.
And Ted, as an expert in innovation, I guess what we would need from you as school leaders is, how do you define innovation, and what should we be thinking about?
Well, innovation is it's one of those things, you know it when you see it. But I think the thing that's really on my mind about this is, there are profound changes as well in terms of how people can communicate what they're good at. And I think you're seeing that in employment circles. I mean, Laszlo Bock has been very at the front end of this, talking about how Google's realized that test scores and grade point average and pedigree of college is irrelevant. You're seeing more and more people in the business world saying we're looking for authentic indications. There's this great initiative, I'm not sure if your listeners are aware, but the Coalition for Access. This is one of the most encouraging things to happen. So 80 top colleges, a totally different path to apply to top college. I mean, these are, I say top, but I mean these go anywhere from state schools, probably 15 of the state schools out of 50 states, but most of the Ivy League schools. So it's a broad cross-section of schools we'd all respect. And they're looking at digital lockers, digital portfolios instead of grades and SATs. And I think you're seeing teachers just, here's what I think we need to do. We need to be as clear as we were in 1893 about what we want kids to be good at, and then trust our teachers to come up with ways to help those kids develop those skills and characteristics. And so, to me, it's heartbreaking when I'm in states. I'm just in Utah, and a bunch of teachers tell me if they're not on a given page of a textbook on a given date, they're in trouble. Dave, where you are in Michigan, I mean, you hear teachers say, every morning I get up and I have to choose between doing what's best for my students and doing what state laws tell me I need to do. That impedes innovation. I think if you say to our schools, we want you to produce kids that are creative, bold problem solvers, that can communicate well, that have a growing sense of what they can contribute back to the world, what their purpose is going to be. And you figure it out and inspire and engage your kids, because what I see over and over again is when the kids are motivated, they go at warp speed, and when they're bored and you push them through worksheets and you can't answer why they're doing it, they go slow, they don't remember it, and they end up, the anecdote Ben told earlier was so telling about, okay, now I'm in college, and now I realize, don't think about what it's for, just memorize the formula, do school, play the game, and get through with it. And if I hope with every bone in my body that every education institution starts running from that. And if colleges don't, I hope they go out of business, and I think many will, because they're overpriced, and many of them deliver very little learning. And I agree with you, Ben. I mean, there's still a societal imprint of approval if you graduate from college, but boy, I sure think that for a lot of kids, that's saying it's $50,000 to $100,000 or more to get to the starting line of life. And colleges either have to raise their game or lower their tuition, or there's going to be an unsustainable problem in society.
And one of the favorite statistics that you provided with the information on the film was on student engagement, and it basically says that student engagement in school plummets as students go higher through the grade levels, from 80% in elementary school to just 40% by the beginning of high school. And that statistic just jumped off the page at me, because our kids are screaming as loud as they can and telling us that they want a different school experience. They don't want the same experience that their parents and grandparents had, and they want us to do something different. So I guess I'll pose that question to all three of you, and I'll start with Dave. You know, we have to acknowledge that, and we have to change some things.
Yeah, I had lunch with the senior class officers here not too long ago to talk about the upcoming movie and to get their support in getting the students to come to it. And one of the young ladies sitting there across from me at the table looked at me and she says, you know, we used to do things in class. We used to do things that were fun to do in class, and it's been a long time. Now it just seems like it's work, right, do this, do that, do this, and it's not fun. It's just not fun.
Yeah, I just had a tweet from Kevin Holliday with the EduLive hashtag, and he says, excellent topic as my son sits here going over his states and capital flashcards.
Yeah, I saw that.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Probably not a lot of student engagement going on, Ted.
No. Well, that's all too sad.
Yeah.
So, Ben, as we think a little bit more about High Tech High, I guess whenever you have people come and visit, and I know you have a lot of visitors come through your doors, what are some of the questions that they're asking, and what do they find most fascinating about your school day?
Well, I think I have a bunch of thoughts about that, of course. One thought I have is that I think sometimes people have this expectation that, like, everything is completely different. And in fact, I don't think it's like at every 24 hours a day, kids are like wielding soldering irons and hammers. Like, sometimes students are sitting in a room and there's a teacher talking. Sometimes they're working in small groups and they're doing problems. I think what we try to do that feels a little different than other schools I worked at before is we're trying to think a lot about what's the purpose of this. So it's not like I get a paper back and I got a B- and I crumple it up and throw it in the trash, but more like, okay, well, what is sort of the true, who is the audience for this work? What is the real reason that we're doing this? And so something that a lot of people ask, you know, well, what would you do tomorrow if you were in my school? And like, of course, I've spent 16 years now at High Tech High, so that's my experience is pretty focused on the experience I've had. But one thing that I guess my hunch is there's something I think almost magical about making student work public to the community. And so one thing I appreciate about the film is that, and you know, and Greg, I mean, I said a lot of things to Greg about what should be in the film, perhaps a little bit like Ted, and like a lot of things I said he didn't put in the film, which is probably correct. But I don't want to take too much credit or blame for the film. But one thing that he really did, I said, what should I capture? And I said, well, you have to come to an exhibition, because that's when it's just really happening. And so he did, and I really appreciate that aspect of it. We had I had a student our first year. We were building robots. And we had a digital portfolio, which in 2000, like having a website was like a really big deal. Adults were like amazed that 14-years-olds could make a website. Obviously, it's not that impressive anymore. And so we had all these problems. We couldn't get the technology working. Work at High Tech High, ha ha ha. And so I was, as a teacher, I was just like really fixated on this idea. I got the websites working. I gathered all my students together. I said, look, this is a huge moment. Everyone's website is live. Anyone in the world with access to the internet and the World Wide Web can see your digital portfolio. And okay, everyone break. And this one boy sat down at his computer. He's a 9th grader, and he was just talking to himself out loud for some reason. And he pulled up his digital portfolio, and I happened to be standing behind him. And he said, "This is really cool. Anyone in the world can see my digital portfolio. I need to fix a few things." And he leaned forward and he started fixing. And I had just a year before, I had been working in more traditional schools, and it just struck me so powerfully, this idea that making it public had really had this impact on him. And then a couple years later, we had an evening exhibition, and the next morning we were gathered together, and this one teacher said, this is my first. I've been teaching for a while, but this is my first year teaching here, and I've never worked so hard. And that's because last night I was really proud of the work that my students did. And then when I walked around the school and I saw the work that other students that were doing, I want my students to look. I want their work to look like the best of your work. And so I think there's something about when we make the work public for all of us, for students, for teachers, for school leaders, some of it's not that great, some of it's fantastic, and it's not about like pointing out the weak work, but it's about saying, this is really great. How can I make my work look better next time? How can I do higher quality work next time? And so that's a question that we get a lot, and that's a part of how I think about it.
Yeah, and I think that's very well said. And Ted, just kind of jumping back to talking about the movement in terms of change. You've referenced a few times being at the Next Generation High School Summit that you recently attended, and I believe you were one of the speakers at the White House. What was the reaction that you received, and what was it like bringing the film to the White House and talking to some of the most influential educational leaders in the country?
I wish I could say inspiring. Honestly, I can't. First there were a lot of great people there. I mean, people who've been doing amazing work for a long time, and and seeing them and having them talk about what they're doing was really great. I felt like the more senior and the more influence the people had, the less they understood about what needed to be done, and so it's sort of like best of times, worst of times, and so. As I say, when a 25-year-old White House staffer addresses this audience telling people that the urgent issue of the ages in education is to close the calculus gap, I just laugh, right? And I worked on Capitol Hill when I was that young, and you sort of get confused between how much you really know and how much people will, sort of kiss your whatever because you work in the White House. And I just feel like that there's this responsibility that we have, and I don't see people delivering on it. And honestly, I don't think that the choices made in education by the Obama administration were at all good, and nor do I think the choices made in the Bush administration were at all good. I mean, it's just been sort of 20 desolate years of just kind of driven by a lack of trust and driven by this obsession with measuring it to the tenth of a decimal point. And so I wish I were here. But here's what bothered me. I'll put it more directly, which is it was a lot of hype around reinventing or reimagining schools, with zero amount of thought to reimagining outcomes. So it was, let's reinvent school experiences so we can get higher test scores, more kids into AP, more kids into college, more, and that's our system today. Our system is optimized around a bunch of outcomes that I think some of which are crumbling, right? I mean, the test scores, I mean, we've been trying to make test scores go up for 20 years and they stay flat, and kids are disengaged and teachers are demoralized. And so I wanted to see reimagination in 72 point font bold, and I saw it in 6-point font light. And it's kind of a trendy thing, but I think you've really got to say, you really have to do your homework. I mean, not that I'm an expert. I mean, everybody else on this knows so much more about this than I know. I'm a rookie. I understand that, but I've worked really hard to try to understand what the issues are, and kind of that convergence between what we want our kids to be good at and what's going to serve them well going forward. And I feel like the people who make the most important decisions should either say, I'm going to just get out of the way. I'm going to stop running around telling people that everybody needs to take calculus, because I haven't done my homework. I don't know what I'm talking about. And, and I actually find that there's so much more interesting stuff going on in the state level. And so I didn't start this process in any way, shape, or form being a states' rights advocate, not at all. But as I see what's going on, particularly in smaller states, they're pretty darn agile, and they're doing some really great things. And some of the other states, the real issues are at the state level. And so I feel like the real opportunity here is to work constructively with educators and legislatures and local philanthropists on a state-by-state level, which is, kind of why I'm going to all 50 states, and then just kind of hope that the federal government, does the least possible damage.
And Ben Daley, I know you have to check out early. You have a family commitment, and before we let you go, we want to let you have an opportunity to share a closing thought with us about the film, or anything you want to share with us about High Tech High and the film experience.
What I want to say is that I met Ted a couple years ago, and he started criticizing me from a progressive position, and I was like, who's this venture capitalist who's like criticizing me from a progressive, like, what in the world is going on here? I've just been so accustomed to, especially at that point, I just felt like I was under siege from kind of sort of dark forces of conservatism, and to have someone actually challenging me from the left in a educational pedagogical sense, I loved, and I continue to love every minute of that, actually. So I think that's one of my favorite takeaways from this conversation. And I do need to go pick up my son, whose school is closing in 9 minutes. So sorry for jetting out here early, but thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being on,
Keep
Ben.
it up, Ben. You're doing great.
Nice meeting you, Ben.
One of the things that I also want to touch on tonight is we have we're in the final 10 minutes of the program, and it's been a great show tonight. I certainly appreciate our guests tonight being on, and everyone participating on Twitter, and of course listening and viewing live on the TeachCal network. But my district is getting ready to host a screening of the film on December 10th, and I have some other colleagues around the country that are also going to be showing the film after the first of the year, and I think a lot of us are having the same conversation. So we want to pick your brain a little bit. At the end of the film, I know there are a couple options that you can put together, either having a panel and taking questions from the audience, or maybe just having one person do a Q&A with folks in the audience. And I want to get a perspective from both of you. What do you like, and what have you seen work the best?
Well, I thought the way we ran it here when we had a community showing that Ted came to, we had a panel, and I thought the best part of the panel was having students in that panel, and we definitely had some awesome students, and even had a very young student in the audience speak up about a part of the movie that he would have done, would have acted out, or would have done differently if he had had the opportunity to make something at his school. And so when you hear those student voices and talk about what they like or what they don't like about school and what they would like to see differently, I think it goes a long way toward building credibility for this movement.
What do you think, Ted?
Well, I've had it all. I mean, I've probably done 100 of these Q&As now, so I've seen anything from my doing it myself to an 11-person panel in one place. So I've had pretty wide dynamic range on this. I'd say if you could be on a panel with Dave, that's a great thing. We were on the panel together in Grand Rapids, and he was really terrific. There are a couple things I think are really important. I mean, one is, and I'd love to be there with the film to make this point, and I make it over and over again, is that High Tech High is in the film. High Tech High happens to be a charter school. There's great stuff going on in all types of schools, and I categorically reject anybody's view that says you have to have a charter school to have an amazing, innovative, successful school. It's just total malarkey. And I've seen some of the most forward-thinking, incredible schools be schools that are just mainstream public education in America can absolutely do great things. And so I think having a panel that shows people from different areas, and what I really push for is let's stop arguing for a while about how the adults are organized and put all of our attention on what the learning experiences are about. And I think, as Dave said, sometimes you can get these students. We had, in I think Ann Arbor, we had an 8th grader on the panel. I mean, it's like, man, I'm getting off the panel and letting her do all the talking for me. I mean, she was really unbelievable. And, students are kind of this, sleeping giant out there. I mean, I think that a lot of times they instinctively know school isn't working for them. And I think when they, as they begin to, and I think they are, connecting the dots and saying, wait a minute, if you're going to tell me I need to be good at something, you owe it to me that it's something that's going to be really valuable to me in life. I think that's a fair request if I were a student. If you say I've got to be good at X, there better be a good reason for why. And reading, I mean, there's a great reason. Writing, like most of the things we do, particularly in the early grades in school, we can articulate, this is important for you to do, this will serve you well long term. And it may not be something they at the time think they like to do, but it's important.
And I know one of the things you've encouraged all school districts and everyone who's watching the film to think about doing is to form their own committee of 10 and maybe set up community meetings. So the conversation will continue after the screening. It needs to be an ongoing dialogue. I mean, is that what you had envisioned when you wanted to do the 50-state tour?
I did a couple of pilots in the spring. I did Rhode Island and Idaho, not knowing how they'd go, and they both went way better than I would have thought. And and it's, for me, what's really where I think I can play a really great role. And then I want to come to Illinois. It's still on our list, so you're on the hook to help me there. But in Lansing, Dave will know. I mean, I was in the state capitol with 25 people we thought it'd be 30 minutes, and it ended up being an hour and a half. And so when somebody from outside of the state with a business background meets with legislators, I can say you are impairing the future of your state with your policies. You are not doing your kids or your economic future of your state, justice with the decisions you're making. I mean, listen to me. I mean, if an educator says that, they think they're just complaining. If somebody, I was in Lansing. I said, this at the time I've been 25 states into it. I said, you guys had the worst policies of any state I've been to so far. And but it's again, like you see some of these states. I mean, I was in Wyoming last week, and the first meeting I had, they had like 13 people, top educators, commissioner of education, top philanthropists, top business people, and several state legislators. How can we work together to make our schools great? And that's what we need to do at the district level, at the city level, at the state level. And you know what? People are going to do it. I mean, people are going to do this. And I think it's just saying we want our kids to be really good at the following, and then we're going to work back and make sure our learning experiences help them achieve those types of skills and characteristics, and start trusting our teachers to deliver on this, because they will.
Yeah, it has been a tremendous honor to have Ted Dintersmith, executive producer, not only of the film, but co-author of the book, Most Likely to Succeed. So you certainly want to see the film, and go ahead and purchase the book. That's a great read as well. And to Ben Daley, Chief Academic Officer at High Tech High, David Britten, certainly want to thank all of you for being here, providing your insight into what has just been a phenomenal look at what public education can be. Today. We don't have to plan for the 21st century. We can start making changes today.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's an important part of what we're talking about. So as we close here in the final few minutes, let's just go ahead and go through some closing comments, and then we'll start with Dave.
Just want to thank you for this opportunity, and enjoyed seeing you again, Ted, and hearing from you. I would agree. If you've seen the film, you need to also buy the book. My book is so dog-eared I might have to get another copy. I can hardly read it anymore. But I really appreciate the work you're doing and Greg did to produce this film. I think it's making a difference. I know it is in my district, and I hope it is in everyone else's.
Great. Thank you so much for being here. Ted?
Great. Yeah. No, the book and the film, I mean, I wrote the book with Tony Wagner. He helped with the film. He's had a number of great books on this topic and has really been leading the way for a couple decades, and that's been a terrific source of support and resource on this. But I just encourage people to go to our website. It's MLTS, Most Likely to Succeed film.org, or just Google Most Likely to Succeed documentary, and it's got all the information about how you can host a screening. We're getting a growing mailing list of people, and we have now broken out our national tour sites, and so I'm in South Carolina, North Carolina, and I think maybe Florida coming up. But so every week it's a new set of states, and then if you're willing to help at that level, most of your listeners might well be quite influential at the state level. Just email me. It's tdintersmith@icloud.com or gmail.com. And as I said, this is the fight of our life. I mean, if we what I often say to audiences is that we have given our kids no shortage of major crises they're going to have to deal with in their lifetimes. I think as a generation, step up in a way we should have. But this is the fight we've got to do. Let's give them the skills and characteristics that will put them forward in life so they can take on these challenges. And I think collectively, you know, as that kid in Newark said, if we could come together to put a man on the moon, can we come together to make our schools great? And I'm betting we can.
Well, I mean, every school district in the country should be showing the most likely to succeed film. I mean, it really is. It will change the way you think about public education, and it's so well done, Ted, and kudos to you. And even watching the trailer, I mean, the trailer is less than 3 minutes, but the trailer is so good, it will get you fired up and ready to run out and see the film. And it's very easy to connect with Ted and the folks on the MLTS website, and they will take you through the process. They provide you with a discussion guide and a lot of planning documents that will help you throughout the process. So it's a great site, a great film, and thank you so much for being here. The Goin Digital Show, this is our last show for 2015. We're going to take a short break, and we're going to come back in 2016. And over the break, look for us on iTunes. So you will soon be able to download the 10 episodes that we've now put out on the iTunes platform, and we're also looking at Stitcher, so hopefully we're going to be able to expand our audience. So for everyone on the Teach Cal Broadcasting Network and for our guest tonight, have a great night, everyone, and have a very happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.